welcome back, and this is still the Precious Morning Show. I need to do this before I dive into this segment for today, which every Tuesday is all about car care, but today is going to be a very interesting one. Before I do that, let me announce my winner for the Bible quiz for today. And Mawenya Gan, I hope I got the name correct. Mawenya Gan, you happen to be my lucky winner for today's Bible quiz. You know what? Call after the show. Call the same number you called, and we are going to attend to you. You redeem your prize as a very special one for a very special day as this. We are still celebrating our 1 year as the Precious Morning Show. So don't forget to call in to redeem your prize. Do that as soon as we are done with the show, which ends at 9 o'clock a.m. Now let's move to the topic of discussion for today. So last 2 weeks we spoke about interior care for the cars. Last week we spoke about external cares or exterior care for the car. And this week we are going to another unit of car care. I have with me Mr. Emmanuel Awume, and I call him Mr. Cecil. He's the CEO of Cecil Consult, and he's a car care expert. He's a car care expert. Today he's here with a very interesting attire, and he happens to tell me it is the mechanical attire of his firm. So he's looking very mechanical this morning because we are going to talk about mechanical care of cars. Why that unit? How important is it? Without it, what is going to happen? And let's learn more from him today. Welcome, Mr. Cecil. I love your attire.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Okay, so this is the attire you wear when you are on field.
On the field.
Good. Okay, great one there. And you can see Cecil boldly written there. This man doesn't joke with his branding. Serious, man. Okay, so Mr. Cecil, today we are talking about mechanical care of cars.
Right.
Why that unit? How important is it? Without it, what is going to happen?
Good. Now, like you rightly said, we spoke about the exterior care of cars. We spoke about the interior care of cars. And now we're going to speak about the mechanical unit of the vehicle. Now, for the vehicle to be propelled or get or set into motion, it requires power to be generated. And so the power that is generated to propel the vehicle along is what we call the engine unit.
Okay, so today we are going to discuss about the engine unit of the car. Okay.
Now, the movement, the whole generation of power and motion of the vehicle goes through various stages. Now, you have the engine that generates the power. It transmits it through what we call the clutch and the drive shafts onto the wheels. The wheel then have grip on the ground and get the vehicle into motion.
The engine is more like the heart of a human being.
Exactly.
Yeah. It's more like the heart that pumps the blood into the
various vessels and get the human being active. So without the engine generating that power, the vehicle is nothing. And so you have various components, units, and parts that have been assembled and put together to generate that power.
Let's move into that.
Good. Now you have the fuel system. First, you have the engine unit, the engine block, that constitutes of various parts assembled together to be able to generate the power through combustion. Now, fuel and light, spark, when it comes together, generates fire. Now, this fire is concentrated in a chamber and compressed under high pressure. So first, you have the air sucking in, and then you have fuel being introduced. First, the air goes in compressed, and then you have light being introduced in to generate the power, the fire. This fire expands because it's burning, and so converts that power onto what we call the piston down to the connecting rod, and then it pushed out onto the drive shaft through the clutch, then finally it gets to the wheels.
Okay, so if I'm getting you correctly, the engine is what makes everything run, everything in the car. So without the engine, you can't move the car in any sense. Without the engine, your clutch can't work. You can't start a car, generally.
No, you will need to start the car before the engine starts
working.
Okay, so you need the battery, for instance, which generates the electrical energy. Supply it to the starter, then the starter then propels, give the initial propelling of the engine to ignite and get it to function. So it is the functionability of the engine that is then transmitted onto the wheels through the various transmission systems. And so this engine constitutes of, let's say, the alternator. You have the fuel injection system, you have the cooling system, you have the lubrication system. All of this put together gets the engine running. And for them to run, they need to be maintained and cared for. So for instance, if you talk about the cooling system, because the engine generates power, heat, it needs to be cooled down. The temperature needs to be maintained at a certain level. And you need the cooling system to take care of that. Now, for fuel to be supplied, for power to be generated, you need a fuel system that should be arranged like that. Fuel is constantly supplied into the cylinders. And then we're talking about the lubrication system. Because we have metals running against each other, should there not be any lubricant to stop them from having direct contact, which we call friction, to damage them, we have the lubrication system also functioning to ensure that as the engine operates and functions, there is enough lubricant being supplied to the various units to make sure every part is well lubricated, not to cause friction to occur. That might cause a total damage to the engine.
Okay, so that's the need for the oil in the car.
That's the need for the oil in the car. Because in science, two metals rubbing each other will cause friction, generates heat, expand, and eventually might cease. But when there is lubrication, it's the friction ability is minimized highly, and so it allows the parts to function as they've been designed. So you can see that we've spoken about cooling system, we spoke about lubrication system, we spoke about the fuel system, and all that. All these are units on their own put together to cause the engine to function.
Okay, I want us to move into, as a manufacturer, I want us to move into the safety and prolongment of an engine. How do we take care of our engines such that they stay longer and they work well?
Efficiently. Good. Now, with the various functions put together or units put together to run the engine, like the cooling system, the fuel system, the lubrication system, the electrical system, and all that, they need certain specified arrangement and checks to ensure that they are always running perfectly. So for instance, the cooling system, you need a certain amount of water to be in the system to ensure that the cooling system functions effectively. And so you have the radiator tank, and then you have the radiator water tank. So there is a certain level. We have the minimum and then the maximum level in the tank that water should be at. That water should not go below the minimum level, and it should always be at the maximum level. So you need to regularly keep checking to ensure that you have that right water level such that your cooling system can function effectively.
If not, what happens?
If not, you damage the engine, because overheating...
Right to the engine?
Yes, because it is supplying water to ensure the engine unit itself is always heated because of the kind of power heat that it generates in its functioning. So the water must always be a constant factor to keep the temperature at a certain level so that the engine can have its normal power develop. Good. Now, in the absence of water at any point in time, you are not contributing the right information in terms of cooling to the engine, and so it will malfunction. And so you always have to ensure, in terms of safety, always ensure that you check those levels. When you open your engine hood, the bonnet, you have all those units there.
How do you call it? Engine hood?
The hood, yes.
Okay, so
we usually call it the bonnet.
Engine hood.
Yes.
Or we call it the bonnet, because that's what I know.
Right. Okay, so you then also check the oil level. As we spoke earlier on, we talked about lubricating the moving parts in the engine. In the absence of that, those moving parts will run to a stop.
Mm.
Now, so there is also a way to check the oil level by using the dipstick.
The dipstick. Is
Yes.
it just any kind of stick?
No, it's a special stick that has been provided in the engine used for checking the oil level. And so when you own a car, just take the trouble for them to show you, if you don't know, the various units that you need to be checking at least every day or every other day or every week, so that you are familiar with this unit. It's easily accessible to be done. So use the dipstick to check the minimum and then the maximum level of oil. That should always be in the car. In the absence of that, you might run into trouble. So those are the safety part of it as well. Then you're looking at also the wiper water container. You know, in the course of driving, you could have visibility problem on your windscreen, and you need water to be splashed on it so your wiper can clear your visibility. So you need to make sure the water content in the container is also right. If you are using the lead acid battery, for instance, you also need to be checking the water, the acid water, battery water level in your battery to ensure that you have the right level of battery water to make sure your electrical system is performing well. You know, and then the traction, the tires on the road, you also need to check. So these are some of the safety measures you look at to put in place. You know.
Okay. I want to ask this question. If you don't check your brake fluid for a very long time, what would happen? What would happen? Maybe you're on road. What can happen if you don't check that aspect of your car?
Let's take it for instance, is just the brakes that holds the vehicle to a right stop. Now, the brakes operate by what we call the hydraulic system. It needs fluid, a special fluid called the brake fluid, to function. In the absence of fluid in the braking system, you expect that the brakes will not function. And so it is very, very dangerous not to be checking your brake fluid. And so should there not be fluid in your fluid container, brake fluid in your brake fluid container, what it then means is that you have the likelihood that your braking system will fail.
Oh.
Yes.
Just like that.
Just like that. If there is shortage of brake fluid in your brake container, or there is leakage in the braking system and you are not aware, and it drains off. So at least by checking the brake fluid within the brake fluid container will give you an idea. Either there's a problem in your braking system.
Okay, I have a next question for you, but before we move to that, let me announce the phone line shortly, because I know a lot of people want to call in now to ask you questions. So I'm with Mr. Emmanuel. I nearly said Mr. Cecil, even though he's Mr. Cecil. Mr. Emmanuel Awume. He is here with an how do you call it? He's here to teach us about cars and what to know, what to do, what not to do. 020-7100-001 is the number to call in now. You can call in now, and Mr. Cecil is going to engage you with all your questions. You have any question you have about cars, call in now 020-7100-001, and we are going to attend to those questions immediately. Okay, Mr. Cecil, you're talking about the brake fluid.
Right. Yes. So when there is shortage or lack of fluid in your braking system, you end up having a problem. Now, one of the ways you can use to find out whether your braking system is faulty is by checking the fluid in the container. If the fluid keeps shorting, running down, the likelihood that there's a leakage within the braking system is there. So you need immediate attention, because under no circumstance should the fluid level reduce. Should there be any reduction in fluid level, it's a very clear idea, fact that there is a leakage somewhere or a fault within the braking system, and you need to check it. Okay. So once you keep topping up your braking fluid regularly, it's risky. Get your braking system checked. Okay. And so under no circumstance should there be short of fluid in your braking system. Okay. I'm looking at the various accidents we've had since, should I go way back 2016? Right. Very dreadful ones. And even this year alone, from the beginning of January to now, it's in the thousands already. We say most of these are as a result of ignorance, or should I say, for lack of a better word, as a result of
people not paying attention to the mechanical aspect or the mechanical unit of their cars?
I think this is comes up as a factor of several reasons. We have the human factor as in attitude. Yeah. We have the ignorance factor as in lack of knowledge in terms of maintenance. And we have the lack of knowledge and then maybe the neglect, not knowing what to do with the vehicle. Okay, how to care for it, how to maintain it. Once you buy the car, all you know is, let me sit in and drive it. And you don't know that the absence of some of these checks that we spoke about can lead to accidents on the road. So the human factor in terms of not paying attention to road signs, drink driving, not checking or maintaining your car regularly. So as you drive, there's a failure in your brakes because you did not check what the fluid in your brake pot. Okay, you also did not check water in your engine, and your engine tends to fail on the road, and you have to suddenly brake or stop on the middle of the road. Whilst on high speed, that can also cause accidents. So there are several factors that have led to these various accidents we have on our roads.
Okay. Yeah. So we see, let me just do this last one. We see a lot of commercial cars, our churches, with black smoke coming out of the exhaust pipes. Is that as a result of not taking care of the mechanical units of their cars?
That is as a result of failure in functioning of several units within the engine.
Okay.
So a weak engine, for instance, just means that most of the parts might have worn out and gone beyond their functional operational use stage and need to be changed. So usually the black smoke you get out there is as a result of oil finding its way into what we call the combustion chamber and being burnt mixed with the petrol and finding its way through the exhaust system, which means that we have what we call the piston rings surrounding the piston, which stops the oil from having its way into the chamber, worn out. And so you have oil spilling through the piston ring and then mixing up with the burnt fuel. And so you can imagine what happens.
I get
oil is not meant to be burnt. It's not that flammable. Okay, it can only ooze out a lot of smoke. It is petrol that is a flammable product. So you have oil, which is not flammable, mixing with the fuel and burning. So you can imagine. Yeah, the incombustion. It can burn. It's a flammable product, but very, very low in terms of volatility. Yeah, so it burns slowly and it generates a lot of smoke instead.
Okay.
It's like putting a wet wood into fire. You imagine how it happened. That's something.
So interesting one there.
Yeah.
But we have to continue this discussion last week. We didn't exhaust everything, but this is what time will permit us to do. Before you leave, your final words before you go.
Right. What our advice is, car owners, don't just buy the car and just sit and drive and have the fun of it. At least take the trouble to get to know some of the basic units that you need to check in terms for safety. So at least get your technician to show you the basic units like your oil stick, your water tank, your wiper blade container, your brake fluid container, and which levels of fluid you need in them. So that at least you can ensure the basic maintenance care of your cars as you hit the road.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Emmanuel Awume. I call you Mr. Cecil. He is a car care expert and he is the CEO of Cecil Consult. You can go to him, he will detail your car proper. We are going to continue this discussion next week, same time, and stay tuned. Mark is coming next with a very interesting discussion on today's beauty, today's women and beauty. And he's having it with a very interesting man. I can't wait to listen to his side on it. Stay tuned. I'll be right back.